Sentencing day in the death of actor Michael K. Williams, who was best known for his role in the HBO series The Wire. 40-year-old Irvin Cartagena was sentenced to 10 years in prison for selling fentanyl-laced heroin that led to Williams' death on September 5th, 2021. He was found dead in his Brooklyn apartment the next day.
State your name for the record.
Omar Devon Little.
On September 6th, 2021, when the late summer heat still clung to the buildings of Williamsburg, Brooklyn, a quiet dread settled over the hallway of a modest apartment complex. A relative had arrived to check on Michael K. Williams after days of unanswered calls. Inside the apartment, the air was strangely still, as if holding its breath. Light from a single window spilled across the floor in a thin, solemn ribbon. When the door finally opened, the truth revealed itself in an instant that felt like an eternity. Michael lay motionless on the living room floor, his body half turned as though he had been reaching for something. Help, clarity, salvation. Nearby, investigators would later find the remnants of substances that had haunted him for years. The police report, released later that same day, confirmed what the silence had already whispered. His life had ended here. His story, though, had not. He was born on November 22nd, 1966, in Brooklyn, the borough that hums with restless ambition and unspoken hardship. The world knew him as a performer of extraordinary depth, but before all that, he was Michael Kenneth Williams, a boy raised between two histories. His Bahamian mother worked tirelessly, her resilience stitched into every breath she took, while his father from South Carolina drifted in and out of Michael's early life like a ghost carried by southern winds. The Vanderveer housing projects of East Flatbush became his childhood landscape, a maze of concrete walls that absorbed laughter, arguments, and the gritty texture of survival. Days were loud, nights were uncertain, and the dreams of children rose like smoke from windows cracked open against summer heat. In those early years, Michael learned to read people before he learned to read books, sensing moods, anxieties, and intentions with uncanny intuition. He was shy but observant, quiet but imaginative. Even then, he carried a fragile mixture of softness and storm, a soul too sensitive for the chaos around him, yet too brave to disappear inside it. He watched the neighborhood men talk big, brag loudly, and move recklessly. He watched mothers hold families together with hands cracked from work and worry. He absorbed everything. This awareness, sharp as broken glass and tender as an old lullaby, would one day become the marrow of his acting. School was not his refuge. What others found simple, he found confining. Teachers described him as distracted, lost in thought, sketching faces or tapping out rhythms on his desk. He drifted away from classrooms and drifted deeper into feelings he couldn't name. But in the world of performance dance halls, music videos, rehearsal rooms, he found the language he'd been starving for: movement, rhythm, expression, the ability to release emotions that had no words. When he dropped out of school and quit a pharmaceutical company job, it was not rebellion, it was instinct. His body knew he was meant for more. During his adolescence, he battled an internal war between longing and loneliness. The streets tempted, not because he wanted crime, but because he wanted belonging. He saw boys slip into danger, drawn to the only power they believed they could claim. He understood them, but instead of following them, he followed music. He danced until his lungs burned, practicing routines in mirrors cracked at the edges. He dreamed not of fame, but of escape. Then came the night that carved a permanent reminder into his skin. At around 19, during a bar fight that erupted without warning, a razor blade slashed across his face. Blood, shock, sirens. The pain was sharp, but the future pain, the looks, the whispers, the assumptions would cut deeper. The scar became the map of a moment that nearly destroyed him, but somehow it became the mark that made the world finally see him. Modeling agencies called, music video directors reached out, photographers found his face. Cinematic. That scar, born of violence, became his inheritance. As he stepped into the entertainment world, he moved with the grace of a dancer and the heaviness of someone who had lived more life than his age suggested. He appeared in videos for artists like Madonna and George Michael. He toured. He worked. He disciplined himself with a devotion born from hardship. But fame, real fame, still felt like a distant flicker. Everything changed in the mid-1990s when actor Tupac Shakur saw a photograph of himself and insisted he be cast in the film Bullet in 1996. Fate often arrives quietly, disguised as chance, but this moment cracked open a door that would never close. Michael stepped into acting as if he had been preparing his entire life for it. The rawness people saw on screen wasn't a technique, it was truth. Yet even as his breakthrough approached, a shadow followed, an early dance injury, a creeping dependence on substances, emotional voids that fame could never fill. According to sources close to him, there were nights he drifted into haze and mornings he woke ashamed. But he kept working, kept fighting, kept trying to outrun the loneliness that settled in him like winter frost. And then came the role that would immortalize him. The streets of Brooklyn continued shaping Michael as he drifted into his teenage years, caught between danger and destiny. He was still just a young man trying to survive the noise around him, but inside he carried a quiet fire, a need to express emotions he never spoke aloud. That hunger led him toward dance, the first language that allowed him to release the weight he had been carrying since childhood. Every movement became a confession, every rhythm a release. His body spoke the truth he was too guarded to say, and people began noticing the strange electricity he carried with him. He tried working regular jobs, tried living a normal life, but normality suffocated him. Creativity was the only place where he felt alive. In his early 20s, he joined music videos as a background dancer, blending into crowds, but stealing attention without meaning to. There was something magnetic about the way he moved, sharp, emotional, almost wounded. Artists began requesting him specifically, sensing something authentic behind the performance. He was on the edge of discovery, but still hidden in the shadows of bigger names. That fragile balance was shattered one night that changed the course of everything. A violent altercation in a Brooklyn bar left a razor-sharp scar running from the center of his forehead to the side of his cheek. The pain was real, but the transformation was deeper. When he saw his reflection, marked by the wound, he realized he no longer looked like the man he had been. He looked like the man he was meant to play. The scar became an unintended signature, dangerous, raw, cinematic. It took him from dancer to something far more intense, something Hollywood couldn't ignore. Casting directors began calling him in, not for softness, but for truth. His face carried the stories of the streets he had survived, and the industry recognized that authenticity immediately. He stepped into acting with hesitance, unsure if he belonged, but everyone who watched him knew instantly that he did. His early roles were small, but his presence never was. Even in silence, he dominated scenes with a kind of emotional gravity that other actors trained for years to achieve. Then came the audition that altered everything, the one that introduced him to the world as something extraordinary. The character was broken, dangerous, complex, layered with contradictions that most actors couldn't touch. When Michael read for the part, he didn't act. He simply opened a door inside himself and let the truth walk out. Producers stared in stunned silence, witnessing a performance that didn't feel like a performance at all. It felt like confession, like memory, like something painfully lived. From that moment on, the world finally saw what Brooklyn had always known. This man was built from struggle, emotion, and relentless honesty. Fame didn't arrive instantly, But the world had started turning its head every time Michael appeared on screen. Directors whispered about him. Actors admired him. Audiences felt him. His ascent wasn't loud, but it was a powerful, unstoppable rise, fueled by grit, trauma, and a depth that couldn't be manufactured. Behind closed doors, though, his success came with a growing heaviness. The roles he played were dark, consuming, emotionally draining, and they found comfortable places inside him. He didn't just portray pain, he carried it, absorbed it, lived beside it. The world celebrated his brilliance, unaware that every performance left him a little more hollow, a little more haunted. But on the surface, Michael was rising slowly, steadily, and unforgettable, carrying the weight of all the characters he had ever been and all the demons he had never escaped. Fame finally tightened its grip on Michael when he stepped into the role that would define him, consume him, and immortalize him in the history of television. When he became Omar Little on The Wire, something uncanny happened. He didn't perform the character. He became the living pulse of a man shaped by violence, loneliness, strange honor, and unspoken wounds. Viewers were hypnotized. Critics were unsettled. Hollywood had never seen a character like Omar, and it had never seen an actor like Michael. The role reshaped his life overnight. One moment, he was a working actor fighting for recognition, and the next, he was a cultural phenomenon. People on the street called out Omar's quotes. Fans followed him, fascinated by the contradiction of danger in his walk and gentleness in his smile. Reporters praised him as the soul of the show, a performer who could hold an entire scene with a single stare. But behind every applause, behind every iconic line, Michael felt a deeper crack forming inside him. Portraying that kind of darkness required him to touch the shadows he had always pushed away. He carried Omar's trauma long after leaving set, and the line between character and man began to blur. The industry celebrated his depth, unaware that the depth came from real wounds he had never allowed to fully heal. His past, the violence he had lived through, the fear he had survived, all returned to him as if pulled back by gravity. Fame brought respect, but it also brought memories he had buried long ago. Even after The Wire ended, Michael remained in demand. Every major director wanted a piece of the energy he carried. His work in Boardwalk Empire added another layer to his legacy, showing the world that he wasn't a one-role wonder. He was a force of nature. He played men haunted by loss, violence, and inner conflict because he understood those emotions better than most. His performances were so genuine that audiences often forgot they were watching an actor at all. They were watching someone bleed quietly through the screen. But as the world admired him, Michael was fighting a private war. Addiction, the ghost he had wrestled with for years, resurfaced. The fame, the pressure, the emotional weight of his roles all fed the darkness he tried to escape. He entered treatment more than once, trying to reclaim the pieces of himself he felt slipping away. People close to him spoke of his kindness, his softness, his habit of helping others even when he was struggling the most. But kindness didn't silence the voice inside him, whispering that he wasn't enough, that he wasn't whole. Hollywood often takes more than it gives, and for Michael, every new role demanded a piece of his soul. He delivered brilliance, but brilliance came with a price. The characters he played became mirrors, forcing him to confront parts of himself he wished he could ignore. Yet he kept working, kept creating, kept giving audiences the kind of performances that left them breathless. He became an artist whose pain deepened his talent, and whose talent deepened his pain. By this stage of his life, Michael K. Williams was no longer just an actor. He was a symbol, a reminder of how beauty can grow from trauma, a reminder of how fragile the human spirit is, even inside the strongest bodies. And as he walked through film sets and red carpets, smiling gently, offering warmth to everyone he met, no one could see the quiet battle he was fighting beneath the surface. He had climbed to the heights of his craft, but the darkness he carried had followed him every step of the way, waiting patiently for the moment when it would finally catch up. As Michael moved deeper into his later years, the divide between his public triumphs and private battles grew wider. On screen, he was a titan, delivering performances that critics described as volcanic, raw, and spiritually charged. Off-screen, he was a man trying to hold himself together, trying to outrun a shadow that had learned his every step. Even when he smiled in interviews or spoke warmly about his craft, there was a heaviness behind his eyes, the kind that only those who've survived real pain can recognize in one another. He began speaking more openly about his struggles, admitting that fame hadn't saved him. It had magnified everything he had been trying to escape. His addiction had become a cycle of relapse, recovery, relapse again, time leaving him more exhausted, more introspective, more aware of how fragile he had become. Friends tried to help, offering support, offering sobriety, offering love, and he accepted it, but darkness doesn't disappear. Because someone reaches a hand toward it, it waits, it lingers, it watches for the moment a person grows tired. Despite the internal war, Michael continued creating art that touched millions. His role in Lovecraft Country became another haunting testament to his power. Audiences felt the weight he carried. They saw the pain behind the performance and respected him even more for transforming his struggle into something meaningful. He knew how to turn scars into storytelling. He knew how to turn trauma into truth. And yet, every role that cut deep left a mark on him in return. As 2021 began, Michael tried once again to ground himself, to reconnect with family, to focus on healing. But the year was heavy from the start. He was still working relentlessly, still pouring emotion into every character, still opening doors inside himself that should have stayed closed. The world saw him as unstoppable, but he was slowing down. He was tired. He was worn. He was fighting the same battle he had been fighting for decades, and battles like that only grow harder with time. His final months were filled with moments of hope and moments of loneliness. He spoke about future projects, about possibilities, about finding balance. But he also spoke in softer tones, as if each word carried a quiet sense of farewell. Those around him noticed the changes. He looked more fragile, more thoughtful, more distant. Not detached, but fading, like someone walking backward into a place only he could see. Then came September 6th, 2021, the day that brought the world to a stunned, breathless halt. When news broke that Michael K. Williams had been found lifeless in his Brooklyn home, the shock rippled across the industry like a crack through glass. Messages poured in from every corner of Hollywood actors, directors, friends, strangers describing him as a gentle soul, a brilliant artist, a man made of fire and vulnerability. But behind their words was a silent grief, because everyone knew he hadn't died from a lack of talent or love or respect. He had died from a battle the world never fully understood. In the aftermath, people lit candles outside his building. Fans revisited his performances, suddenly recognizing how much of his real heart had been embedded inside each character. Journalists wrote tribute after tribute, but none of it filled the quiet space he left behind. None of it eased the truth that a man who gave so much beauty to the world had been swallowed by the same darkness he portrayed so brilliantly on screen. Michael's legacy became something larger than fame. It became a warning about the cost of carrying too much pain. It became a reminder that even the strongest performances can hide the most fragile souls. And it became a testament to a man who never stopped trying, never stopped creating, never stopped giving meaning to the characters the world had forgotten. In the end, his story became exactly what he spent his life portraying, a mixture of brilliance and tragedy, strength and vulnerability, triumph and heartbreak, a life filled with light that fought endlessly against the shadows that followed him, a story that leaves behind questions, emotions, and echoes that will haunt the industry for generations. Even as the world celebrated him, Michael's personal life remained a quiet battlefield. Relationships were intense, fragile, sometimes fleeting. Friends spoke of his loyalty, but also of the way he carried the weight of everyone he loved. Romantic partners noted his deep vulnerability, the way he could be tender one moment and distant the next. A soul split between craving connection and retreating from it. Hollywood, with all its lights and cameras, could not fill the emptiness he sometimes felt in quiet moments. Fame was no antidote for the aches of memory, nor for the scars life had etched into him long before the world noticed his talent. Michael poured himself into roles that mirrored his inner landscape. In Boardwalk Empire, he became chalky white, a man wielding power and ruthlessness, yet tethered to a profound sense of justice and history. To audiences, he was an imposing figure. Behind the scenes, Michael studied every nuance, channeling pain and triumph alike. He refused shortcuts. He refused to fake emotion. Every glare, every subtle twitch of his jaw, every silence between words carried truth. It was exhausting. It demanded immersion into darkness that few could endure without leaving a piece of themselves behind. Even as he mastered these performances, the private Michael was quietly unraveling. Substance use, though never an open secret, grew more dangerous in moments of stress and isolation. He sought escape in ways the world would never witness, always with care to maintain the facade that he had cultivated for decades. The juxtaposition of his brilliance and his private fragility created an almost unbearable tension. Friends would later describe him as someone who seemed larger than life, on screen but smaller than anyone could imagine in the quiet hours. A man who gave everything and carried the weight alone. Despite these struggles, Michael remained devoted to community and family. He engaged in charitable work, particularly with young people facing the same neighborhoods and obstacles that had shaped his own childhood. He understood the pull of streets, the allure of danger, and the seduction of escapism. He worked tirelessly to build programs, spaces, and opportunities for youth to channel energy into art, dance, and creativity. In this, he found purpose beyond the screen, a chance to heal what the world had often failed to protect. Yet Hollywood continued to demand more. With each new project came expectations, pressures, and deadlines. Every role required excavation of emotion, often from the deepest, most uncomfortable places. He played characters grappling with trauma, addiction, violence, and betrayal. Roles that mirrored his own experiences more closely than anyone realized. The work was cathartic and destructive simultaneously. Michael understood the duality of performance. It could heal, but it could also consume. And as the years passed, the consumption became harder to resist. Michael's final years were marked by an unrelenting tension between creation and destruction. He remained in demand, landing critically acclaimed roles, yet the intensity of his life off-screen never relented. Interviews revealed a man thoughtful, articulate, reflective, and aware of mortality in ways that few actors face before middle age. Yet the inner turbulence persisted. In private, he wrestled with shadows that fame could not illuminate. Friends described nights spent alone, battling depression, addiction, and the overwhelming pressure of being both a cultural icon and a fragile human being. There was a poetry in his struggle, but also a stark tragedy. His life's final chapter was as quiet and sudden as the man himself. The Brooklyn apartment, the narrow hallway, the muted sunlight filtering through the windows bore witness to a story that had been decades in the making. On September 6, 2021, Michael K. Williams was found dead, a life ended by the very demons he had spent a lifetime portraying on screen. Substances laced with fentanyl and heroin had taken him, a cruel echo of the characters who had haunted him in fiction. The news reverberated through Hollywood, through Brooklyn, through every fan who had ever felt his presence as both Omar and Chalky, as Michael, as a man of extraordinary depth and talent. Even as projects continued to pour in, even as awards and praise followed his every move, Michael's inner world became a delicate balance of survival and exhaustion. On set, he was meticulous, commanding, magnetic, gesture precise, every pause calculated with instinctive timing. Yet off camera, he was often drained, haunted by a lifetime of pain that could never be staged away. The characters he inhabited carried their own weight, and Michael absorbed it all, internalizing each moment of betrayal, loss, and desperation as if it were his own. Friends whispered that he seemed to carry the entire world inside his chest, pressing against ribs that were already tired from years of trauma and survival. He was a man who had mastered control over his craft, but not over his own vulnerabilities. Substance use remained a quiet specter, appearing and receding, a constant reminder that the escape he sought never truly lasted. Addiction was a companion he had known for decades, a shadow that followed him from Brooklyn's streets to the lights of Hollywood. He entered rehabilitation more than once, fighting to reclaim himself, to hold on to the man beneath the public persona. Yet the more he wrestled with the darkness, the more it seemed to learn his patterns, to anticipate his next weakness, to wait patiently for its moment. Despite these struggles, Michael's devotion to his art never wavered. Every role was an excavation of truth, a deep dive into lives of pain and resilience, and he gave himself entirely to each performance. Whether portraying the relentless Omar, the calculated Chalky White, or characters who demanded subtlety and shadow, he imbued each with a rare honesty. That honesty resonated not only with audiences, but with those who knew him personally. Colleagues spoke of his kindness, his humility, and his loyalty, of the way he could lift a set with a quiet word, a gentle laugh, or a careful observation. He gave more than talent gave presence, humanity, and soul. And yet, giving so much left him more exposed, more vulnerable to the very demons he depicted. Even in private life, the contradictions continued. Michael was fiercely loyal, yet he carried isolation like a second skin. He loved deeply, but connections were often tenuous, strained by his own struggles and the demands of fame. Friends and family sensed the tension, the simultaneous brilliance and fragility. Conversations with him could shift from laughter to an almost unbearable sadness, as if the weight of his experiences could never be escaped. He held stories within himself that few would ever know, experiences too painful to recount, moments that shaped him but could not be shared without breaking some part of his carefully constructed persona. Though the headlines captured only the surface awards, the roles, the deeper story lies in the spaces between, the hours of doubt, the nights of isolation, the ongoing battles with inner demons. He survived streets that could have swallowed him, a childhood that could have hardened him, and a world that demanded perfection while offering little understanding. He transformed survival into expression, pain into poetry, and struggle into performances that continue to haunt, inspire, and resonate. Michael's genius lay in his ability to reveal the human condition with unwavering honesty, to make the invisible visible, and to make audiences feel the weight of reality through a single glance or gesture. His legacy is both enduring and enigmatic. He remains a symbol of artistic courage, a man who gave everything he had without ever compromising the authenticity that defined him. His story reminds us that brilliance often walks hand in hand with vulnerability, and that the most unforgettable lives are those lived fully, passionately, and without pretense, even when the world cannot see the full truth. Michael K. Williams taught us that art is a mirror to life, and that life itself is messy, beautiful, tragic, and complex, worthy of every performance we can give. In remembering him, we do not simply recall the roles or the fame. We recall the intensity, the depth, and the humanity that he poured into everything he touched. His life was cinematic not because it was perfect, but because it was raw, unflinching, and endlessly compelling. And as the world continues to watch, study, and celebrate his work, The quiet power of Michael K. Williams endures, leaving behind a story that is unforgettable, haunting, and profoundly moving. His presence lingers in every shadow, every silence, and every performance legacy of truth and beauty that will never fade.